It's 8 o'clock. This is the UK Tonight. Coming up, the fly tippers who are cashing in on the countryside. We'll have a special report into the criminal gangs making money from illegally dumping waste and leaving farmers with hefty clean-up bills.
How do you feel about these people and what they've done?
I haven't got any words that I would be able to use at the moment to describe it on camera. It's absolutely disgusting.
Also ahead, calls for faster and fairer justice for another state-related scandal. For decades, thousands of NHS patients were knowingly given infected blood, but now an inquiry into the scandal says victims are waiting to die in limbo, with many still facing delays to compensation. Plus, Keir Starmer and Emmanuel Macron agree on the need for a new deterrent to tackle smuggling gangs and small boat crossings. We'll discuss exactly what that might look like. And the Lionesses keep their hopes alive in the Women's Euros with a vital victory over the Netherlands. We'll have the latest from Zurich, with Wales also in action tonight. All that to come and more here on the UK Tonight. We begin with what's being described as the new narcotics, the growing problem of waste crime across the UK. Organised criminal gangs are cashing in on the countryside by dumping rubbish and leaving farmers with massive clean-up bills to get rid of the stuff. A Sky News investigation has now uncovered one group allegedly making money by operating as private refuse collectors before then dumping the waste on unlicensed sites. Sky's Rachel Venables has been having a look into it.
Counting their cash, they flaunt it at the camera. This group have clearly made a lot of money. But how? They're waste operators, clearing out homes, gardens and building sites. But Sky News believes that some of the rubbish this group was paid to dispose of legally actually ended up being illegally dumped, fly-tipped. We've been investigating the boom in waste crime, described as the new narcotics, and blighting farmers and landowners all over the country.
My first line of defence, which were these gates, as you can see, they've been bent and broken.
The steel gates and concrete bollards which surround this farm in Berkshire cannot keep the criminals out.
It's the bane of our life, really. Fly tipping, blocking up and unblocking the entrances. Constant battle.
There's obviously an element of real organisation here and criminality.
We've had it on locations where organised gangs have actually broken into locations, put their own security man there and had fly tipping in from out of London. They filled the warehouses up to the eaves with contaminated waste.
It's costing them tens of thousands of pounds a year.
We're here to grow food, to feed the nation. We don't want people blocking it with fly tipping.
Waste criminals will be paid to remove rubbish, but instead of taking it to the tip, which costs money, they dump it for huge profit in places like this. Over the past 8 weeks, Sky News visited these 3 large fly tip sites, just 3 miles apart in Hertfordshire.
We're in Hartwood Forest, just north of St Albans, a normally beautiful public space. But overnight, someone or a group broke in through the gates here and dumped lorry load after lorry load after lorry load after lorry load of rubbish and rubble, and they drove off, leaving it in this state.
I haven't got any words that I would be able to use at the moment to describe it on camera. It's absolutely disgusting. We're out here working most of the day, you know, various jobs, probably about as hardcore about 20 volunteers. And you can imagine some of them don't know about this yet, but make them cry, I think, you know. It's horrible.
We're on the hunt for the people behind this, and while looking for evidence, we find a huge amount of personal information.
We're just looking in these bags for anything that gives us evidence or information about where this could have come from. Invoices, names, receipts that can help us work out who's done this.
Soon, in a second site in a nearby field, we find both names and addresses.
But you can sort of see it all over there.
Builder Charlie, not his real name, says he paid 2 men with a van £300 to remove waste from a recent project.
Yeah, you can see the bags in here. Oh man. Yeah, that's the bags, which I believe is ours.
He tells me one of the men had an official Environment Agency issued waste carrier's licence.
Did you ask them where this would end up, or did you just presume they would do it right?
Well, I presume they're doing right, like everyone else we have.
And how does it feel to stand here to know that they've just pocketed your £300 and done this to the environment?
Disappointed.
Do you feel cheated?
I do, yeah.
If individuals were paid around £500 for each van load removed and dumped, then this third field of more than 40 loads could have been worth around £20,000 to them. But the landowner, a farmer, says it could cost him nearly £50,000 to clear it up properly. With evidence now from multiple customers, Sky News' data and forensics unit were able to track down a group of waste carriers working together.
They post a lot of videos on TikTok. We found a video of them and they were travelling down Coleman Green Lane, the same lane as two of the fly tip sites that we found on the edge of St Albans.
In another TikTok video, they're getting rid of a coffin. We found a coffin dumped at the third and largest fly tip site. Videos posted by the group on TikTok show them clearing out properties, waving huge wads of cash at the camera and unloading waste. One clip appears to show them shovelling debris into what looks like an abandoned warehouse, another clearly on the side of a country road. We tracked one member of the group to a housing estate in London.
We believe that waste that you've been paid to remove has been dumped illegally in the countryside. Can we ask you some questions about that?
About what?
Fly tipping.
Well, I don't do rubbish removals.
You don't do rubbish removals? Well, what's this?
The airbag is not for rubbish removals.
What does it do?
I do for work.
For work, okay.
Yeah.
Do you know this man? On TikTok, that coffin looks a lot like a coffin that was found there.
Yeah.
So this is the sort of thing that we've been finding, which is why we wanted to ask you these questions. Because it's a huge problem. And it's costing the farmers, the local council, a huge amount of money. Have you ever fly tipped? Have you ever made money from fly tipping?
No, I don't do rubbish removals.
Okay.
How do you make your money?
By work. Okay. Painting.
He denied all knowledge of the dumping. Waste crime is costing us an estimated £1 billion every year, but enforcement is patchy and the legal punishments often lacking.
If you put it in a field, it's free. If you take it to an HWRC or to a landfill site run by waste operators, then there's what's called a gate fee, which then has to be paid per tonne effectively of waste that you're depositing. So it's difficult often for regulators to catch them, and then when they are caught, penalties are, if they're not done in the right way, are low, and it's not a deterrent for them.
Last year, local authorities in England dealt with 1.15 million fly tipping incidents, a 6% jump on the previous year. But just 63,000 fixed penalty notices were issued, a 5% drop, while the average court fine was only worth £530. A council spokesperson said fly tipping is a criminal offence, punishable by heavy fines and even imprisonment, and the rubbish involved can be a health hazard, harm the environment and cost a considerable sum to clear up. When we have the necessary evidence, we will not hesitate to prosecute or fine offenders. We have been taking robust action against fly tipping for some years. Every time waste is illegally dumped, someone, the landowner or taxpayer, has to pay to clean it up, knowing that before long, it'll happen again. This is a national battle, one that we're all losing. Rachel Venables, Sky News in Hertfordshire.
And Rachel joins us now from St Albans. Rachel, fantastic investigation, but people will watch that, as I did, and be absolutely furious with the situation.
Yeah, and I think it's completely understandable. There are many people who are furious with this situation, whether it is the farmers involved. I mean, just look at this mess which surrounds me here. There are some 40 sites, 40 loads, van loads worth that have been dumped in this one farmer's field alone. And as you heard in the report, it could cost him up to £50,000 to clear it up. But also this is, of course, a blight on the environment, and it does a huge amount of damage just to the local councils, to their coffers, the huge amount it costs for them to investigate and also to clear it up when it happens on public land as well. We're all suffering, really, when it comes to this issue, while we know that the criminals behind it, well, they're only making money. They are only benefiting from this. And you can see some of the waste here. Obviously, you'll have seen it in the report. Let me tell you, what the pictures don't convey is the smell. There is clearly food or some sort of waste that is rotting here. It absolutely reeks, and it just stretches on and on all the way through this field. We know there's things like contaminated waste here. There's also things like building rubble. So you can see shrubbery and trees from gardens, all sorts. Now, I'm joined also here tonight two men, Will Dickinson, a local farmer, and I know you know the farmer who owns this field, and also Councillor Paul de Court, leader of the local St Albans Council. Will, I want to start with you, because obviously this is an issue that affects farmers. Is this something that affects you, and how much of a problem is fly tipping, organised fly tipping?
Fly tipping is a perennial, constant problem. 87% of farmers have suffered fly tipping of some sort in the last year. And so it just continues all the time, every day.
And when you see this field and you know the bill that the farmer has received, possibly to have to clear it up, what impact's that going to have on his business, on his ability to keep going?
When I spoke to the farmer here, he was really, really down about it. It's just an awful lot of money, and right now, with everything else, it's really just not there. The money's just not there. And the fact that he's a victim of crime, and because he's a victim of crime, he then has to pay to put the crime right. It's just so unjust.
Yeah. And of course, it's the local council's responsibility to investigate this. And how much of a strain on resources? Do you have the resources? Do you have the capacity to deal with things like this, to investigate it properly?
Well, local councils have a tremendous pressure on the resources, as we've heard about farmers as well. That's nothing unusual, so it's choices all the time. So if this is getting done and we take this seriously and we have invested resources into it, it's something else or at the council's activities that's not getting dealt with. So, yes, a problem for all taxpayers and all residents, as well as farmers, as we've heard about.
And how much money do you put into things like investigating these sorts of crimes, and how much money do you get back when it comes to the courts, comes to the fines? Because as we're seeing, the national picture is that people really aren't getting that much financial punishment even when they are caught.
We successfully prosecuted 5 people last year, and the total amount we got in court costs was £7,500. It costs us about £150,000 to run our enforcement operation, investigation operations, so they're completely different magnitudes.
So you are just losing money just to do the bare minimum of the investigations that you can manage?
Yes, yeah. I wouldn't say it's losing money, but I know what you mean. Money is going out of taxpayers' pockets while it's going into the people who do this pockets, and that can't be right.
And how do you feel stood here this evening looking out at all of this mess and this farmer's field?
I'm, to be honest, depressed, really. I mean, I'm depressed because of the impact on people's well-being and farmers' well-being, anyone who goes around these fields. But I'm depressed that this has been a long-standing national problem, and fundamentally, governments haven't gripped it. It needs the courts to be much stronger and provide a proper disincentive for people to do this. This, as you've said, is a professional operation done for money, and people are seeing it as a cost of doing business.
And Will, for you, last question, what needs to change? Is it local government? Is it national government? What's the answer here?
In my book, the real answer is that the judiciary need to stand up, and they need to fine these people. They need to take the penalties properly. There's up to 20 years in prison and a £50,000 fine. 95% of fines issued in 2023 were for less than £1,000. If you take the cost of a skip at £400 in this area, plus the clean-up, the fly tippers on the good money. They know they are. They're on a winner.
Is this effectively been almost decriminalised, this crime? It feels as though so many people can do it and just never get punished.
I think you could say that, yes.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Is that how you feel as well?
I think it's the tragedy is that the costs of the crime falls on the landowner, falls on the land controller. Where it's on private property, the farmer will be prosecuted if he doesn't clear this up. And that makes him a criminal for being a victim of crime.
Well, listen, both, thank you so much for your time. I really appreciate it. And you heard there, of course, the side of two people, really, a farmer who is often the victim of this crime, these sorts of incidents, and the head of the local council who have to investigate these sorts of crimes. But we know, of course, they have a real lack of support and real struggles sometimes when it comes to the finances, when it comes to the resources, and actually being able to deal with it and investigate it properly.
Yeah, just so infuriating and seemingly unfair for all concerned, Rachel. Thank you very much indeed. For the second time in 2 days, an inquiry has laid bare the injustice suffered by victims of a state-related scandal. Last night, we were talking here about the plight of sub-postmasters wrongly convicted because of that faulty Horizon IT software. Today, it's the infected blood scandal. The chair of the inquiry into the scandal says victims are waiting to die in limbo, with the compensation scheme perpetuating harm for those who've been impacted. Sky's health correspondent Laura Bundock has this.
It's been a decades-long fight for justice and compensation, but the struggle and suffering continues.
It's turned into another horror story, a scandal in a scandal.
Stuart's attempted to take his own life twice. He was infected with hepatitis C, aged just 8.
I'm having to vindicate what they did to me again. I feel like they're not listening again. The claims manager's not listening, IBCA are not listening. And I'm having to relive the whole process and trying to justify why I should get compensation.
The chair of the infected blood inquiry, Sir Brian Langstaff, agrees. A year after his final report, he's written another, making yet more recommendations. That people should be able to apply for compensation rather than wait to be asked. The obvious injustice of excluding people infected with HIV before 1982 must be corrected. Unrealistic evidence requirements should be removed that'll stop most people who experienced severe psychological harm from having that recognised.
Do you have confidence that the government finally will be listening to what you're saying?
I don't think it's too late to put things right. And I think with the will, things can be made fairer and things can be made faster.
Claire's family are among those yet to be contacted by the compensation scheme. Her dad, Trevor, died from AIDS complications after receiving contaminated blood.
It's vitally important that my mum, now in her senior year, she's 71, she does have multiple health issues, that the government recognise that these people have waited too long. There are still 3,000 people who have not received any interim compensation whatsoever. We've not had a penny, we've had no acknowledgement of our suffering.
The inquiry says while the government's apologised for the infected blood scandal, that apology will only be meaningful if those infected and affected are properly listened to and if ministers act on the mistakes they've made so far.
A government spokesperson told Sky News this additional report reflects the unprecedented nature of the infected blood scandal and the thoroughness of the inquiry's investigation. Over £300 million has been paid to victims since the compensation scheme opened last October, and we're taking action to enable a quicker compensation process. It mirrors the post office scandal. For the second time in consecutive days, the government's been told to act urgently to compensate. And once again, victims left feeling unheard and overlooked. Laura Bundock, Sky News.
Richard Warwick is here with me in the studio. Richard was infected with HIV and hepatitis B and hepatitis C as a child from contaminated blood products because you're haemophiliac, aren't you, Richard?
Yes.
So your blood doesn't clot on its own, so you needed blood to help you do that. Do you feel, as Laura said at the end there, unheard?
Yes, I do, yeah, along with many, many other people that have seemed to feel to them as though they've fallen by the wayside, not been listened to. They haven't had the chance to engage with the inquiry or the compensation authority to have their input, particularly on the expert group panels. So it's been a long, drawn-out we think, unnecessary process so far, and there seems to be lots of hurdles and stumbling blocks in the way.
This is so similar to what we heard yesterday with the Post Office IT scandal, things, the can being kicked down the road, difficult for victims to get the compensation they feel they deserve. Do you see the similarities here?
Yes. The cynic in me thinks that they're just delaying and delaying in the hope that more and more people will die.
Because a lot are dying, 2 a week?
Yes. Currently, on average, 2 people are dying every single week because of this infected blood.
Yeah. Look, people have died waiting for the Post Office compensation to come through, around 350. We learned yesterday 13 people took their own lives. We saw there in Laura's report that Stuart was made to feel suicidal. Is that something you're hearing about? It's not just the conditions that people are living with or the infections they have unfortunately been given. Are people being driven to desperate measures?
It's having a huge psychological impact on people that are desperately ill and very frightened anyway at this time. They don't know their future. They can only hope that this bit of financial help will enable them to get on with the rest of their lives. There are people that are literally dying that cannot make ends meet. For instance, parents in their 80s, you know, they're going to die. Infected people in their late 70s. It was refreshing to hear Sir Brian say today that there's what used to happen if someone was granted compensation and they died, basically the compensation would die with them.
Yes.
And now he's actually going, he's recommending that money goes to the estate.
Yes.
Rather than being lost forever.
Yeah, because the impact on your life affects the people who love you, and that's going to be the case for others. Look, where we're at is that more than 2,000 people, let's say, are eligible to apply for the compensation. More than 3/4 of people have done that. But there's been around a quarter paid out. So there's clearly a lot of people waiting for what they feel they deserve.
Exactly. I think about 430 people currently being paid out.
Yeah.
It comes to £326 million. But that's still a tiny fraction. I think it's about 5 or 6% of the total number of people that are eligible for compensation.
Yeah, in comparison, more than £1 billion has been paid out by the government to around 7,000 in the Post Office IT scandal. So they've found the money there. Do you look at that and think, well, what about us?
I think a lot of it's down to the time that this has been going on. This has been rumbling on for 4 or 5 decades.
Yeah.
And the reason it hasn't captivated the public's imagination in the way that I think the Post Office scandal did is because people have said all along, it's been brought up in Parliament and MPs have said, incoming MPs have said, oh, I thought that had all been sorted.
Yes.
It pops up on the news now and again. It's covered whenever anything new is said in the Commons or there's a new Cabinet Minister comes in and talks about it, and then it all goes quiet.
I know the ribbon you're wearing represents HIV, hepatitis and the black parties for people who've lost their lives.
Yes.
The difference with the Post Office scandal, Richard, and correct me if I'm wrong, is some people will look at that and think, there but for the grace of God go I. The Post Office thing feels like it could happen to anybody. Do you think people don't react in a similar way to the infected blood scandal?
It's funny you should say that. The way I see it is we used to have a post office on every high street.
Yeah.
It was a common part of everybody's way of life.
So you'd see it?
So you'd see it, it would stick in your mind.
Yeah.
Infected blood, contaminated blood, it doesn't quite grasp you in the way that something like a national institution like the post office would.
Yes.
So it's not something that people hang on to, I don't think. I think it's one of those things that are sort of, I've heard about it, but I don't want to talk about it.
But I spoke to the youngest victim of the Post Office scandal, who was 18, and he's been fighting that for a good, almost 20 years. You received infected blood when you were a child. Many people did. And it's affected decades and decades of your life. There's a difference there.
There is. I mean, I was first infected in 1975, which is a long, long time ago, initially with hepatitis B, then C and HIV. And I'm one of the lucky ones, in the fact that I made it to where I am today.
Yes.
So many of the school friends that I went to school with, college with, that were in my position, a haemophiliac, of the 122, 80 are dead. And you know, there were times we'd come back from summer holidays and we'd be missing another one.
Yeah.
It was like that. It was so stark. What we're trying to do at the moment is get a memorial built at the school to remember the children, because they can't speak for themselves. We can speak for them.
It is remarkable, the advances in medicine to be able to tackle. I mean, we grew up in the 80s and we remember the threat of HIV and AIDS, and now obviously antiretroviral drugs can manage it and make it more of a condition than the death threat it certainly seemed to be back then. In terms of a light at the end of the tunnel, Richard, do you think that the government will speed things up? They will get the payments made? Because they previously, and this is not just this government, governments have said that's what they think they should do. So do you think they actually will step up and do it quick?
That's a difficult question to answer. I mean, I've been down so many blind tunnels, hit so many brick walls, we've been promised so much, only for those hopes to be dashed in the past. And we're not talking one or two occasions in the past. We're talking about multiple times that we've been promised this, that and another, and everything's fallen flat on its face. So, while I'm always optimistic, the sceptic in me thinks we'll be back here again at a future date. That's just the way it seems things are going.
Just to finish off, Richard, when the compensation comes through for you and for others, how much of a difference would that make to people?
It will sort the lives out of many people who have problems with their mortgages, pay off debts and the like, but no amount of money, and I've said this before, on many occasions, you can have a nice stash of money in your bank account, it will never bring back that health that you used to have. It will never bring back your liver or the virus. You'll never get rid of the viruses. It's still there. It's nice to be able to afford things at the drop of a hat, but you'll still be in exactly the same position as you were before you received the money.
Look, really grateful you could come and talk to us on the UK Tonight. And as this progresses, hopefully in your favour and others, please come back and talk to us about it.
Of course, yeah.
Thanks, Richard. Still to come here on the UK Tonight, the inquiry into the Southport attack. Here's testimony from the families of injured victims. Plus, a possible visit by President Trump to Scotland in the coming weeks. We'll have more on that too. And it's tapestry time. We'll talk about how this incredibly historic artwork is returning to the UK after the best part of 1,000 years.
Turkey is burying its dead.
Whole families died in this collapse. Generations wiped out. I'm Siobhan Robbins, Sky's Europe correspondent based here in Berlin.
This is just a small sample of the deadly arsenal taken off the streets.
Anyone could say, I'll do that, and then have to go and shoot someone.
Yes.
Sky News, get the full story first.
The public inquiry into the Southport murders today heard harrowing testimony from the families of children who were hurt in the attack. Axel Rudakabana stabbed and killed 3 young girls in what's been described as one of the most egregious crimes ever committed in the UK by the chair of the inquiry. Axel Rudakabana also attempted to kill 10 other people, including 8 children, in July last year. And the mum of one girl who survived the attack told the inquiry her daughter fought like hell to escape. A warning: this piece from our chief North of England correspondent Greg Milam contains distressing details.
The terrifying, awful reality of what children experienced that day in Southport last summer played out in front of the inquiry into whether that attack could have been prevented. A father told how his daughter was stabbed in the back 3 times by a coward she didn't even see. She has no self-pity about what happened to her, he said. She wears her scars with a dignity and defiance that is remarkable. We couldn't be prouder of her. She is our hero. 3 girls didn't survive, of course, and we know the authorities have been aware of Axel Rudakabana. The father said lessons need to be learned from what happened and processes need to be changed if organisations and people need to be held to account for what culminated in that awful day. Then we trust that this inquiry team will do that. The inquiry then heard from the mother of a girl who was stabbed 33 times, lost her entire blood volume and required 2 life-saving operations. She struggles to understand how she survived, she says. She's grieving for children she didn't know before. She described seeing the CCTV footage of her daughter being pulled back into the studio by the attacker to be stabbed 20 more times before she escaped for a second time. She's much more than that moment on CCTV, she said. It carries her courage and determination to survive. She fought like hell to get herself out of that building twice, she said. Most painful of all is that those children had to fight for their own lives. She tries to understand how someone could do this to children. It's been a living nightmare to support her through her thoughts and feelings of the person that did this. Some days she's able to hold so much empathy and space for what he perhaps was feeling or went through, what his life may have been like to do this. Did he have friends? Were people not kind to him, she asks me, confused. Could he not talk to his parents if he had big feelings? Why did no one help him? How did he get the knife? Did his parents know? Why didn't he get stopped? It is the key question in this inquiry. It will hear from more families when it resumes in September. Greg Milam, Sky News, Liverpool.
Plans are being drawn up for Donald Trump to visit the UK in the coming weeks. Police in Scotland say preparations are already underway, with reports the US president is likely to touch down in Aberdeenshire to see the opening of a second course at the golf club that he owns. Let's speak to our Scotland correspondent, Conor Gillis, who broke the story earlier. Evening to you, Conor. Tell us more about this then.
Yeah, good evening, Matt. The President is expected for a royal visit. Clearly, we're expecting that state visit potentially later on in the year, September time, according to multiple sources. But a sideshow in all of this has been the talk of Trump coming to Scotland. Last year, his son Eric Trump intimated that he could come to open one of the new courses at one of his golf resorts here in Scotland this summer. And sources close to Donald Trump and within Trump circles have said that preparations are underway. No definite date has been confirmed. No final plans are in place. But clearly, when the President comes to town, there is a significant security and policing effort that must be put in place in advance. Donald Trump has 2 golf courses here in Scotland, one on the Ayrshire coast at Turnberry, the second, as you referenced there, on the Balmedy estate in in Aberdeenshire on the northeast coast of Scotland. Sources are suggesting that potentially this could be a visit over more than a number of days, potentially up to 5-6 days here in Scotland, starting in Ayrshire and then going north of Glasgow and Edinburgh up towards Aberdeenshire. We are being told, though, by police here in Scotland they are planning this. We had a government meeting last night here to discuss the security arrangements, and clearly the police are gearing up for what could be a significant moment. Sources saying 5,000 police officers potentially working 12-hour shifts, but clearly with everything Donald Trump related, it could all change at the last second.
Very good point, Connor. Thank you very much indeed. Still to come here on the UK Tonight. The Prime Minister hosts the French President for talks on tackling migration. We'll have the latest from Downing Street. And England's Lionesses cruise to victory over the Netherlands with a much-needed win, a thrashing, in fact, at the Euros. The Prime Minister and the French President have said that tackling small boat crossings is a shared priority for their two countries. In a meeting in Downing Street today, Sir Keir Starmer and Emmanuel Macron agreed on the need to go further in addressing the crisis in the Channel and to develop a new deterrent, they said, to stop the people smuggling gangs. They're expected to announce a deal at a summit tomorrow. But right now, I'm joined by John Vine, the former Independent Chief Inspector of Borders and Immigration. John, good to see you again.
Good to see you, Matt.
What do you think they will announce tomorrow?
Well, I think they're going to announce some arrangement with the French to return migrants who've arrived by boat to France. And I think in return, what's being proposed is to find somebody who's seeking asylum in France, who's seeking asylum in Britain, who has relatives in Britain. And I imagine there's going to be a proof of concept, a pilot scheme to try and get something like that off the ground. And this is significant because for the first time that I can remember, the French are agreeing the prospect of returning some of these migrants back to their country. So that in itself is a step in the right direction.
That's what you think they will do. Is that what you think they should do, or should they be doing something else?
Well, I think what the government has said up until now is that they're going to rely on enforcement, beefing up enforcement of the immigration rules. They've certainly beefed up the number of arrests around illegal working. And they've put together a Border Force commander and teams to try and work with the French to tackle migrants getting on boats across the Channel. But as we've seen so far this year, that hasn't really proved very effective as yet. I mean, the numbers are increasing. And so that alone as a deterrent, enforcement as a deterrent, isn't working. So I think what the government's accepting now, for the first time, this government is accepting there needs to be a new deterrent. And you know, rather like the last government, which looked at Rwanda as a possible deterrent, this government is now seemingly going to announce tomorrow, it would appear, some arrangement with France, which I think would be a good thing. The only thing is the scale of what's being proposed, I think, is going to be the key issue.
Yes. Talking of scale, it is the case that many more applications for asylum are made in France than are made in the UK, a lot more. And still, people travel through France and try and get here. You know, my colleague Adam Parsons has been speaking to people on the French side today, and the English language and our system of doing things, is certainly in terms of applications for asylum, seems to still be that big draw.
Yeah, there are tremendous pull factors that we have, that I think in Britain we underestimate them. I mean, the English language is a very obvious one. I think a lot of the migrants come from countries which in many cases have links with the UK, or we've had colonial links with their countries.
Yeah.
But also, I mean, what Macron was saying was that he was pushing back in his visit. He was saying to the Prime Minister, well, you know, we need to do more to help the situation as well. And the French have a very particular view about, as they see it, the ease with which migrants can, you know, get benefits when they come to the UK. And the fact, of course, that in the UK, we don't have identity. We don't have an identity checking system. We don't have ID cards like virtually every other country in Europe. And so basically he was saying we need to get some of our acts in order as well in order to help the situation. So I'd be very interested to see if Macron gives way in terms of this pilot, what he asks for in return.
John, just very quickly, though, regardless of ID cards and what the French may or may not do, is there still a problem with the backlog of processing applications?
Yes, there is a massive backlog. I mean, I think the last time I looked it was nearly 100,000. It may be over that by now because, of course, all the migrants who come across in these boats, they invariably claim asylum when they reach the shores of the UK, and they are added to the backlog. And also, of course, if they've got no accommodation, they have to be provided with somewhere to stay, and of course the cost keeps rising. So it's a vicious circle, really. It needs to be turned into a virtuous circle, to use management speak. And you know, the Home Office, you know, has really has to do its best to try and get through this backlog of cases. And of course, many people, although they arrive in the UK, they're not allowed to work at least for a year while their application is being processed. They're going into the grey economy. They're finding jobs in the grey economy quite easily. So, you know, that's again something that Macron has highlighted.
John, we don't mind hearing a bit of blue sky thinking, to use some more management speak. Appreciate you joining us tonight. Thank you.
It's a pleasure.
So the Euros now, and England's Lionesses have bounced back. They've roared back, in fact, from their opening game defeat to secure a much-needed 4-0 thrashing of the Netherlands. Wales are currently facing France in their second game of the tournament, so a good time to bring in our sports correspondent, Rob Harris, who's in Zurich. Rob, first and foremost, how are the Welsh getting on right now?
Well, it's currently, surprisingly, Wales 1, France 1. Jess Fishlock, Wales's all-time top scorer, has scored her 48th goal for her country, the age of 38, to stun France with an equaliser. So no one was expecting that, particularly after France here on Saturday beat England 2-1, and that was a terrible English performance. But where they were so sloppy against the French, they were sublime here against the Netherlands. And we can take a look through those goals now. This was a victory all begun in the 21st minute. And the Chelsea forward, Lauren James, blasted the ball through the defence into the top corner for a sensational start. What they really needed, though, was a second to ease any nerves, particularly after that opening defeat for the European champions. And it came 3 minutes into injury time at the end of the first half, when Georgia Stanway had a stunning strike of her own from outside of the box. The Bayern Munich midfielder celebrating. She said the other night it was like a night out you want to forget when you wake up in the morning. This was certainly a night to remember. But coming out after the break, on the hour, came the third goal. Cross from Lauren James and cross from Lauren Hemp, and Lauren James was on the score sheet for a second time. And what a moment for the Chelsea forward there. And then in the 67th minute, the Manchester United midfielder Ella Toone finishing off the glorious night with a fourth goal. And there were 3 assists from Alessia Russo as well. Serena Wiegmann, the England manager, a lot of pressure was on her, and just hearing from her, she said she was excited, but she even felt the tension going into tonight, knowing that they had to have a result, because if they lost, they'd have been facing an early elimination. Now, they will reach the quarterfinals if they beat Wales on Sunday. But as we're seeing tonight, Wales are putting up quite a fight against France. But the reigning European champions in England finally look like champions again.
I hate to tell you, Rob, I think France have just got a penalty against Wales, just shy of half-time. So you might want to have another look at that. But currently 1-1. Hopefully France won't score that one. Rob, thank you very much indeed. Come on, Cymru. Coming up here on the UK Tonight, the medieval artwork depicting the Norman conquests of England that's returning to the UK for the first time in almost a millennium. Plus, a shocking Formula One. Christian Horner has been sacked as the team principal of Red Bull.
I'm Cordelia Lynch, Sky's Asia correspondent based here in Bangkok. We've been undercover inside Asia's huge network of scam centres.
This compound is, without a doubt, the worst. It is essentially hell on earth.
We cover a vast, varied and dynamic region that's shaping the rest of the world.
Our app gives you the very best of Sky News wherever you are. Breaking news, videos and analysis.
Evidence of the crisis.
Podcasts, watching us live. I'm live in Jerusalem.
Wherever you get your podcast.
All in one place and all at just the touch of a screen. The Sky News app. Get the full story first.
I'm Dominic Waghorn, Sky's International Affairs Editor, covering a world that seems to be unravelling.
It's not his country, it's ours.
Sky News, the full story first, free wherever you get your news. It's half an hour now past the deadline that Hamas issued, and we've now seen a third barrage of rockets coming in.
We arrive, a secret hospital hidden in the Myanmar jungle, treating the victims of this bloody war. This is Myanmar today. Its military rulers don't want the world to see, but we have.
I fight for my own future. I fight for my generation's future.
This is an actual crime. They don't care for that. Myanmar army is only a couple of kilometers away.
So this is a major humanitarian disaster.
I witnessed the complete destruction of a place linked to my childhood memories.
This is insane.
I'm Yusra Al-Bagher, Sky's Africa correspondent based in Johannesburg, South Africa. I felt awe when we saw the mountain gorillas in Rwanda.
We call him the king of the jungle. This is the alpha silverback.
Sky News, get the full story first.
Welcome back. Let's get the sport now. Chris Latcham is here with me in the studio. Big ructions today, Chris, in the world of Formula One. Tell us more.
Yeah, big news in Formula One today, Matt. Christian Horner sacked by Red Bull, and it comes after 20 years in charge. Christian Horner almost rhymes with consistent performer. You look at the success they had. 8 drivers' titles. Sebastian Vettel had 4. Max Verstappen had 4. 6 constructors' titles. They were incredibly rosy years in the early part and in the more recent part. But the last year has not been great for him. Now, he gave a really emotional speech today, which the video you can see in full on the Sky Sports app. And it's well worth watching. It's subtitled because it's a little bit muffled, slightly off microphone. But he tears up at the end. And in that speech to his colleagues and all of his employees at the Red Bull garage, he says it was a complete shock to me. I didn't know this was coming. He was told yesterday, and we only learned about this news this morning, that the guy who has always been in charge at Red Bull, everybody in that garage has never known Red Bull without Christian Horner. And all of a sudden, he is gone, and it's a new era.
I'm still trying to work out your rhyming style. Well, it's close, it's close.
Freestyling.
He's not been without controversy.
No.
Is that why this has happened, or are there other reasons for it?
I think there's a few things at play, but if you go back to the last 12, 15 months, I think it's been a really difficult time for Christian Horner, but also for the Red Bull team. So you'll remember that he was accused of and cleared by 2 investigations of inappropriate behaviour with a female colleague. The team came out and backed him, but when that happened, Max Verstappen's dad, Jos, was a public critic of that, and he said if he stays, it risks tearing this team apart. In that time, key allies at the team have left. Adrian Newey was their supreme designer of the cars. He went to a rival team. Others have left, and they've also had a real downturn in form. The first 10 races last season, they won 7. In the 26 races since, they've only won 4. And Christian Horner has paid with his job. That's the big story. Let's have a look at the rest of the sport today.
Staying connected is vital for business. Sky Business sponsors this report.
Sorry, I just have a German passport. Hopefully I can convince them and show them and prove them that I'm proud to be the English manager.
For only the 3rd time in history, the FA have turned to a foreign manager to take charge of the men's England team. Thomas Tuchel follows in the footsteps of Sven-Göran Eriksson.
If we don't do results, of course, they will try to hang me, but even if I was an Englishman, they hang me. So that's...
And Fabio Capello.
A winner with a capital W. That was the template. This is the man.
When the news about Tuchel broke, there was a mixed media reaction. Some in Tuchel see a Champions League winning manager and the best candidate available if you want to win a World Cup. That's certainly how the FA bosses.
Sky Business sponsors this report.
Thanks, Chris. The Bayeux tapestry is returning to Britain for the first time in more than 900 years. The famous 70-metre embroidered cloth depicts the Norman conquest of England in 1066, you knew that, including the Battle of Hastings. It's being loaned by France and will go on display at the British Museum next year. Dr. David Musgrove is the author of The Story of the Bayeux Tapestry and host of the History Extra podcast and is here now. David, are you excited by this?
I am wildly excited, Matt. It's the biggest news story ever to have hit history. It's great news, very, very exciting, and also very promising for my book as well, I would imagine.
Well, I mean, nicely handled, nicely done. Has it really not been here in all that time, in almost a millennium?
Well, we don't know the answer to that, actually. The first documentary reference we have to the tapestry is in 1476, so a good 4 centuries after the Norman conquest. That tells us that it was in Bayeux Cathedral at that point. Most people, most academics would agree that it was probably made in England in the decade or so after 1066. So it probably was there then, but we don't know where it was after that. It may have gone to Bayeux. It may have been in a collection held by the Duke of Burgundy, curiously. But after 1476, it kind of lives in Bayeux pretty much full-time until now.
could have been called the Burgundy tapestry. If it was sewn here, what name should it have then?
Well, some people would suggest that it should be called the Canterbury embroidery, because actually it's not a tapestry; it's an embroidery. Semantics, but it's not a tapestry in the official designation, and it was probably made in Canterbury. So yeah, the Canterbury embroidery, but it's not quite as snappy, is it?
Not quite as snappy. No, it needs some explanation. Look, it's going to go to the British Museum, and of course, this loaning of historic artworks, artefacts like this, will bring to mind things like the Elgin marbles as well. There's discussion about them potentially going the other way, not to France, of course, but being loaned back to Athens, right? Is this kind of thing becoming more commonplace, the loaning of artefacts back to where they came from originally?
I don't think it's becoming more commonplace. I think this has been a traditional way that museums operate for a long time. It's not. It doesn't suddenly open the floodgates to repatriation of things like the Elgin marbles. I think they would be seen as a very separate case. This is quite a unique and specific example, so it doesn't really fit in that same way. But I think George Osborne, the director of the BM, was talking about the fact that we are sending the Sutton who treasures the amazing treasures from the Great Anglo-Saxon ship burial in Suffolk and the Lewis chessmen over to France, and it's very much a quid pro quo. We're getting something really cool. They're getting something which is also pretty cool.
I have to say, David, just to finish off, there's another element to the Bayeux tapestry that people get kind of obsessive about, and it's counting a certain number of appendages that are on it. Will that be done when it's in the British Museum, do you think? Kids will get a bit excited about that?
We're going there, are we, Matt? OK. Yeah, I mean, it's a very interesting aspect of the tapestry. You're right. There are 93 or perhaps 94 phalluses in the Bayeux tapestry, 88 of which are attached to horses, important to say, but there are some attached to male figures in the upper and lower borders. Whether there will be like a handy little notebook that you go around and you tick them off as you're looking around the tapestry, I rather doubt, but it would be an interesting thing.
Yes, people weren't as prudish as we are these days back in 900 years ago. David, really appreciate you joining us. Thank you very much.
Thanks a lot.
Time for a look at the weather now.
The ideal atmosphere, whatever the altitude. The weather, sponsored by Qatar Airways.
High pressure is really establishing itself, making it mostly very warm and dry this week with widespread heat wave conditions likely by the weekend. Before then, mostly fine this evening, but the far north and northwest will be windy and rather grey with patchy, drizzly outbreaks mainly over the Northern Isles. It's looking quite murky near Western Irish coast as well. The far north and the northwest can expect a bit of patchy rain tonight, while misty low cloud and hill fog will spread across much of Ireland and Northern Ireland.
Breathtaking views with clear skies ahead. Qatar Airways sponsors the weather.
That's all from the UK tonight. You can catch up on all the highlights on our webpage. Up next, it is The World with Yalda Hakim. I'll be back tomorrow night, 8 o'clock, the usual time here on Sky News. Bye for now.